Capitol. Into the Capitol.
What?
No! Peacefully. Fed.
How's everybody doing? My name is Anthony Brian Logan, and today we got to talk about Ray Epps being sentenced for his role in January 6, 2021 at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. Now, you may have heard many commentators on MS-13 DNC, CNN, Fox, etc. refer to January 6 as the worst thing since 9/11, maybe even worse than 9/11 or Hiroshima, Nagasaki. They say this is one of the worst things ever. So when you hear this man at the very beginning of the video who says, let's go into the Capitol, you would think that they would give him a very harsh sentence, especially since the average sentence of those who were involved with January 6 is 3 years on average. Some got a lot more. We'll talk about that in a minute. Some got less, but the average 3 years. So if you see that on videotape, you would think he would get some time in prison, jail, or something, right? You'd be right to think that, but you'd be wrong in the case of Ray Epps. He got no jail time at all. He got a slap on the wrist at best. At worst, he was let off the hook scot-free. We're going to get to the actual sentence in a minute. But first things first, let me show you another person who was convicted as it relates to some January 6 activities. Now, let's take a look at the screen. This is Enrique Tarrio, the alleged leader of the Proud Boys. He was sentenced to 22 years in prison for quote-unquote seditious conspiracy on January 6. Now, here's the thing about Enrique. I covered him in this story as it was unfolding back then, January 6, 2021, and the days after. The federales picked Enrique up on January 5th in D.C. So he was not out there on January 6th at all. But I guess because he was there and they thought he might try to be involved in some sedition, the conspiracy charge is what got him 22 years in the penitentiary. Now, isn't it also a conspiracy in the eyes of the law to say, let's go into the Capitol on camera? You're conspiring to actually engage in a so-called insurrection, to engage in the so-called riot. You're doing that right there on camera. So wouldn't that be in the same ballpark as what they're trying to say Enrique Tarrio did? And again, the federales picked him up the day before. And that leads to my next point about the whole thing about being a Fed. $1 million question. People are asking me all over the place. They're saying, hey, ABO, do you think that Ray Epps is a Fed because of the lack of a sentence, because of how he's being treated by the media, kid gloves? Well, maybe. First of all, I can't say whether he is or not. I don't have that information. I don't have documentation on him. I don't have his paperwork. But maybe that and a little bit more. It can't just be that he's a Fed, because Enrique Tarrio was a Fed. Yes, he was. I'm not trying to attack him. I'm not trying to throw dirt on his name or anything like that. There's documentation, paperwork on Enrique that at least in the past, he was a federal informant. That's not even up for discussion. That's a verifiable fact. We have evidence, documents that says that Enrique Tarrio worked with the federal government. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing if you want to fight crime and get guys locked up who should get locked up. Okay, at a certain point, that's just called law enforcement. I'm not really too upset about that. But the point is, when you have allegedly 200 federal agents involved in January 6th, and then they set something up to where it's like the whole Gretchen Whitmer kerfuffle. Remember Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan? She was the center of a plot, of a kidnapping plot. There was a group of guys, they called them white supremacists or something to that extent. And the allegation was that these guys wanted to kidnap the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer. Well, come to find out, that out of maybe 20 or 22 guys, 18 of them were either outright federal agents who worked for the Bureau or they were informants. Only about 2 or 3 guys were not feds. So it was like it kind of got entrapped into it. The whole case fell apart as a result of that. This could be that. It could be something more, but I think there's most certainly something more when it comes to Ray Epps. Now, let's get into some news clips here. I'm going to show you how they were treating this man. Okay, and before we get to that, let's look at the actual sentence that Ray Epps has received. Check it out here. So, 1 year probation, a $500 restitution, and 100 hours of community service. And again, the average sentence, 3 years for being involved with January 6th, but he got no jail time, no prison time, a $500 fine, and 100 hours community service. Oh, and a year of probation. I don't think this guy who is a boomer in his 60s is going to get in any kind of trouble. I think that he's protected for some reason. Who he knows, what dirt he has on somebody, I have no idea. But the way the media have been treating him is crazy. Now, let's look at this right here. This is going to be from 3 months ago. This is back September the 19th. This is when charges were announced against Ray Epps, and he was just recently sentenced. Listen to how they speak about this man. Then you're going to kind of understand where I'm coming from when I talk about the media giving them this princess treatment. And if you want to see it in full without my commentary, link as always will be in the box. If you're on IG, visit the link in the bio, go to the corresponding article on the website. But without further ado, let's go ahead and roll it.
And Ken, moments ago, we learned that a single charge was filed against Ray Epps, a man who was the subject of several January 6th related conspiracy theories.
Conspiracy theories? What are you talking about? I played the video at the beginning. That's not an edited, doctored, fake, or anything video. He said, let's go into the Capitol. So again, if Enrique Tarrio, who again was not present at the Capitol at all on January 6th, he was in federal custody on January 6th. If he gets 22 years in the penitentiary for conspiracy, surely when someone says, let's go into the Capitol on January 6th, that'll fall up under the umbrella of conspiracy, of conspiring to commit an act of sedition, treason, insurrection, whatever they want to call it.
That's right. Jose, Ray Epps has been kind of a boogeyman in certain right-wing circles because the conspiracy theory arose that he must have been a government operative because he was seen in videos exhorting people to go into the Capitol, but then he was taken down from an FBI webpage and he was never charged. Well, today he was charged with
See, and you know what? Let's pause right there. Right when these charges came out, I knew they were doing this to try and quell any of us on the right who say, hey, what about this guy who's on camera saying going to the Capitol and he's not been charged? Now they can say, well, he did get charged with what? Basically, you would get more time if you got a bag of weed in your book bag in Georgia. Like a bag of weed about that big, a cell phone size bag of weed. You're going and getting more time than he did for something other guys got football numbers in the penitentiary for. Now, I'm not saying they should be in the penitentiary. Don't get it confused. But if we're going to be consistent, let's be consistent. And if we're inconsistent, there must be a reason.
Misdemeanor disorderly conduct and a criminal information would suggest that he's going to plead guilty. He never entered the Capitol. He's not charged with violence, but he has said was not a federal informant. And in fact, he is suing Fox News and Tucker Carlson for defamation. And now that he's been charged with a federal crime, it really does suggest that there's no merit to the idea that he was acting on behalf of the federal government on January 6th.
Doesn't mean anything because, again, I showed you Enrique Tarrio, 22 years in the penitentiary, but he is a verifiable federal informant, or at least he was at one point. I can't say whether he was or was not at the time of January 6th or before he got locked up, but obviously he was on the Fed's radar and they had prior communication with him as an informant. So you put 2 and 2 together, see if you get 4. So that's what's going on with Ray Epps. Again, slap on the wrist. You heard what they said. Misdemeanor disorderly conduct, talking about he didn't go into the building, all this and that and the third. I'm not convinced that he is not a Fed or something. There's something else going on. I think to say that he's a Fed, I think that it makes sense here. But I think there's more. Maybe he works for the government in some kind of way. Maybe he knows people in the government, has dirt on them. Maybe he was something else, some other part of some other kind of program that they had on January 6th to create the desired outcome. And the media, I think, are in on it because as I close, I want to say this. Anyone loosely affiliated with January 6th is pretty much given the rope. Anybody, people want to ask me, interrogating me, well, where was I at on January 6th? Huh? Like, do I need to call a lawyer? I was not present anywhere near Washington, D.C. on January 6th. I've not been back to D.C. since 2020 at all. Okay? So there was no way that I could have been there. They want to try to get me like Enrique Tarrio, other guys who weren't even there that day, locked up for a very long period of time. It's ridiculous, but contrast the way they treat others with the way they treat Ray Epps, and you got to ask yourself what's going on. But I think I'll leave that right there for now. And what said you? What's your take on what's happening here with Ray Epps getting no jail time at all? Again, 1 year probation, 100 hours community service, and a $500 fine. That's it. Misdemeanor disorderly conduct. You got guys who have been in jail with no representation, no nothing, for just being outside the premises. You heard the guy right there say he didn't go inside the Capitol. Well, other guys were not inside the Capitol. Other guys weren't even there, and they still got penitentiary time. So explain it. I want someone to explain it to me seriously, without a snarkiness, without anything. Just give me a reasonable explanation that I can believe. Whatever your thoughts are, please let me know in the comments below. And that's all I got to say for this video. If you like what you heard, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.